Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube. It is your girl Honey. Welcome back people, welcome back. If those of you who are new here, welcome to my channel. Please make sure you guys like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, make a suggestion on video topics that you'd like me to see me do, because that little subscription, that little like button really helps to really boost my videos and get my content out there. Help a girl out wherever you can. Right, so we are going to be talking a little bit about infertility and astrology, but before I get into that, I've got to have a disclaimer put out there because people get very sensitive and very upset. This is a very sensitive topic and subject for a lot of people, so we have to be very cautious of the information that we are sharing. Okay, so people, if I mention a placement that you guys have, your children have, you know, your friend has, someone has, please don't take it as though I'm reading their personal or their individual charts. This is all educational based, so we're here to learn and share with each other. Now, if there's a placement that I mentioned that you guys have, it doesn't mean that, oh my god, you're never gonna have kids, oh my god, it's impossible. There's always possibilities when it comes to astrology. We're trying to find out placements that might create more of a hindrance or more of a challenge in that area. And as you guys know, how I do things on this channel is I always use my own chart as an example to encourage and help you guys to learn from, because we share over here. All right, please bear that in mind. We are just here to learn. And also, please check out my website, honeysastro.com, if you guys are interested in purchasing a love, relationship, sex document. I'll link it in my pinned comments below. Please purchase it again to help a girl out. It's all of the tea regarding love, sex, relationships, pimps, sex workers. Everything about sex is in this document, so please make sure you download it. I will link it below in the comment section, so please make sure you invest to help a girl out. We are going to be talking about house placements, so make sure you are looking at the circular chart, not the list chart. The fifth house is the house of creativity, self-expression, performing arts, but it is the house of children. The fourth house can also be looked at as well, because the fourth house links us to the emotional core and how we will raise our roots, which can essentially have an effect on how we view children. The 11th house opposes the fifth house. The 11th house is the house associated with our social circles and organizations, but it also has an effect on what's happening in the fifth house. So the fourth house, fifth house, and the 11th house are all going to be very effective when it comes to having children. So the first thing I want to look at is the ruler of your fifth house. What does the fifth house ruler look like? In other words, if your fifth house is ruled by Aries, Mars rules your fifth house. If the fifth house is ruled by Capricorn, Saturn rules your fifth house. Or if you're like me, the fifth house is ruled by Virgo, or even Gemini, Mercury rules your fifth house. Okay? The planet that rules your fifth house, you have to look at the condition of that planet. So for example, for myself, right, Mercury rules my fifth house. My Mercury is jacked up, people. Absolutely jacked up. My Mercury squares my north and my south nodes. It's in Taurus, it's in my 12th house. It's jacked up. However, my Mercury has had to rely on trines, you know, to create more of a emphasis surrounding my ability to conceive. When you have a very challenging fifth house ruler, that's going to affect your ability to conceive, okay? And especially being a woman, you need to find out what's happening with your moon, your fourth house, your fifth house, your fifth house ruler, the ruler of your moon. All of this will contribute to your ability to have children and to conceive. So if you have Mercury ruling your fifth house, Mercury is a placement that indicates indecisiveness. Not saying that you are going to be indecisive about having kids. You very much can if Mercury rules your fifth house. But there can be things that contribute to you being held back. You might be in a very good place in your life for 6 months and you want to have kids, but then something happens and you're suddenly held back again. And you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have kids right now. Like, Mercury becomes very indecisive and it's not always certain of whether it wants to have children or not. But Mercury as your fifth house ruler can create those delays. If Mercury rules your fifth house, you have to be a lot more aware of what's going on. Mercury is 2, links us to 2. In terms of like a Gemini, right, 2. But think of the parts of your body that has 2 things. You've got 2 lungs, 2 ears, 2 eyes. As a woman, you've got 2 fallopian tubes, or you've got 2 tubes. You've got 2 ovaries. When you have a very afflicted Mercury, where you have Mars aspects in your Mercury in a negative aspect, Pluto aspects in your Mercury in a negative aspect, which, yeah, I have that as well. Oh my God. You're more likely to experience issues with your ovaries, with your fallopian tubes. And that's something that you are not always going to be aware of. Like, I also have Neptune trining my Mercury. So I had not been aware of one of my ovaries being problematic for years. And I was wondering what's going on. And they're checking, yeah, your ovaries are fine. No, one isn't fine actually. And you've got to tell me why it's not fine. And that took years to find out what the issue essentially was. And that Mercury, again, if your Mercury is jacked up, my Mercury is in Taurus. Taurus, again, slow moving, slow. I didn't find out that I had issues until years had passed. If you've got a Capricorn Mercury, if you've got Mercury aspecting your Saturn, you know, these are all things you have to try and look into when it comes to finding out what's happening with your ovaries and your fallopian tubes. They can be blocked, they can be closed off, there can be something going on that's preventing, you know, you releasing a healthy egg. Even in terms of having surgeries, right? Pluto, I feel like Mars and Pluto aspecting can create you having a surgery surrounding those things in that area. So even if it's like ectopic pregnancies, fallopian tubes, Mercury, you've got to check, you know, if you're prone to those types of pregnancies. And if you are, you have to take your precautions, look into it. What can you do to prevent it? And I mentioned before about my North and my South node aspecting my Mercury, and that being very, very challenging, because remember my 5th house is ruled by Mercury. So with North node aspecting my North and my South, with North and South node aspecting my Mercury, it just creates that back and forth, not really being sure of what the issue essentially is. If the Sun rules your 5th house, I personally feel like the Sun is good, right? Because I've seen it work out for a lot of people who have Sun natally in the 5th house, where they do tend to have a very special child, or there's a closeness to their relationship that they have with that particular child. On the other hand, the Sun isn't seen as being the most fertile position either when it rules the 5th house. Looking at the condition of your Sun as well can also contribute to what's happening as to why. So for example, right, if your Sun is aspecting Chiron, there can be a confidence issue about you being a parent. Like, maybe I'm too mature, I'm not ready to be a mum yet, or dad, or whatever, or I don't think I'm going to be a good parent. There's going to be a lot of concerns surrounding your ability to parent. So I wouldn't say it creates delays. It's more so about how you feel about yourself when the Sun rules the 5th house. When it comes to Mars, right, Mars rules Aries and co-rules Scorpio. Mars being in this house can link us to people who experience losses, miscarriages, things like stillbirths, difficulty. It's like the conception happens, but towards having the pregnancy full term, there can be complications. I'm not saying that Mars being here cannot, you know, create or have a full term baby, but Mars tends to bring a lot of complications when he sits in the 5th house. The thing is with Mars is very much about the adrenaline energy and excitement, fun, you know, the impulsivity. So I kind of feel like when Mars rules this house, there can be an element of being very impulsive towards making your decisions, of being a parent. And even if it came to an issue of infertility, there may not be enough research that can be done surrounding what your options might be. If Saturn is your 5th house ruler, that can be because you've got Saturn, because you've got Capricorn in here, or even Aquarius, right? Think about Saturn as rules, regulations, restrictions, responsibilities, right? We see someone who is very interested in taking this very seriously, taking fertility very seriously. You know, I want to bring a child into the world who's going to be very happy being here because I have created a stable home environment. I have an amazing job with amazing benefits. I have the perfect partner. I've been married for 5 years. I've traveled. All of these different things are going to contribute to that person's decision making when it comes to having children. There can also be that which can create the delay of when you have kids, because not everyone has it together at 25. You know, it can take a lifetime, it can take 40 years to get to a place where you feel like you've got exactly what you need before you choose to have kids. There can also be a fear as well. When it comes to Saturn, you can be very much afraid of not being able to be a great parent. There can be a fear of not being responsible for your kids. There's usually something that just prevents the ability to have kids. I've also seen it to be quite common when Saturn sits in here. There's a lot of people that do end up with problems when it comes to their fertility, especially when you have Saturn return through this house. People experience losses, they experience miscarriages, they experience issues with their reproductive system. Maybe they've been trying for a child for a long time, but it's not happening. But now I found out about it, during my Saturn return, or like health can play a very big role in this house, especially if you have the 5th or the 6th house ruler in the 5th house, which could be Capricorn in the 6th, Saturn is in the 5th house. Health plays a big part here as well. Jupiter, the Moon, and Venus are the most positive planets to rule your 5th house. Okay, so you want to kind of have those planets that rule in the 5th house that give us more of a positive expression towards fertility. You have the 5th house ruling planet that happens to be retrograding. Retrograde energy is described as energy turned inwards. However, it's expressing in a way what I call it's misdirected. So direct planets can move freely in a straight line, right? It knows where it's going and what it's supposed to be doing. The retrograde, I'll go this way, or I might go that way, or I might go. It's more so trying to find its way, but it's met by more obstacles along the way. So the 5th house will know if that's retrograding, you're likely to experience a lot more issues surrounding fertility because of the retrograde energy itself. So there may need to be more reflecting to be done on how you can have and how you can work on your fertility. When you have planets that are retrograding in the 5th house, right? Retrograde energy is not as direct, so it kind of is not misguided. It's misdirected in its journey. I've read for a lot of women and also a couple of men who have retrograding planets in their 5th house. Even if it's positive planets like Venus or Jupiter, these people tend to have more of a delayed approach when it comes to having children. And I've read for people who, particularly women who are a lot older, and they're like, honey, am I going to have kids? Am I going to have kids? And it's like, I'm not saying that you can't have them. It's because you delayed so much time in the process of, wanting to have kids. You're going to have health, that's going to contribute now to your ability to have them. Now, adoption is something that is very important to look into. If I had the means to, I 100% would. Because adoption is something that is really, really good for people who have planets retrograding in that 5th house, right? Along with having kids as well. But if you're feeling very delayed, and it's becoming a point where you're coming to a time where you can't have kids or whatever, look into adoption, because you are still supposed to be a parent of somebody, maybe not biologically, which is fine because you have kids that need to be adopted, but that 5th house being in retrograde, it's just because you have been misdirected when it comes to your time. That's all it is. It's just misdirected. Moon placements such as Capricorn, Mars in challenging aspect to your moon, Saturn aspecting your moon, those positions all contribute to there being some type of restriction towards fertility. And I've made a video where I spoke a lot about, how to find pregnancies in astrology a couple of years ago. I will link that in my comment section below where you guys can find that or watch that. But when it comes to the infertility side of things, Capricorn moon, Saturn aspecting your moon, even Mars aspecting your moon, and even Aries moon can all create some sort of delay, right? Now, a lot of people from my generation, we all have the Saturn, Neptune, Uranus in Capricorn, okay? Now, if you have a cardinal moon, which happens to be Libra, Cancer, Aries, or Capricorn, there's a strong possibility that Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn could be in challenging aspect towards your moon. Now, for me, I have Uranus and Neptune conjunct my moon. Now, think about Uranus, right, as unconventional, rebellious tendencies, When Uranus is aspecting your moon, Uranus is going to create a lot of the inconsistency that your moon absolutely hates. The moon is how we regulate our menstrual cycles, okay? And when you have Uranus conjunct your moon or aspecting your moon, that creates a lot of the flippant energy to your menstrual cycles. Very inconsistent, very irregular. But when you look at Neptune, Neptune is confusion and things that we can't make sense of. Neptune is linked to our hormones. So what we find is someone who may have hormonal imbalances and really struggling to find out exactly what the issue is. So you have a lot of women out there who are dealing with things like PCOS. You know, PCOS is a hormonal issue and it creates a lot of irregular menstrual cycles where your period may not be here for months. Now, for me personally, I didn't have PCOS, but I did have irregular cycles and extreme bleeding, extreme bleeding. Blood, right, comes from your Mars placement, and the irregular cycles can also come from your Mars placement. You know, when you have Mars squaring Pluto, Mars in the 8th house, you know, it can create a lot of very irregular bleeding, irregular cycles, regular bleeding. And this is all down to hormonal issues. Even Mars aspecting Neptune, okay? Mars square or opposed Neptune in conjunct Neptune creates a lot of irregular menstrual bleeding. Now, I went to a doctor hundreds of times to find out, can you guys please do a hormone test, find out what's irregular, what's happening to me, what's going on, my cycles are jacked up and I can't conceive because my cycles are jacked up. And they would do tests and everything came back as it's normal, it's normal, it's normal. And this pissed me off because I couldn't find out what the issue is. When you think about Uranus, it's also about alternatives, you know, alternative medication. So I did look into holistic ways of healing, trying different supplements, which was a major help for me. I still take it to this day, major help for me. So although I didn't find out exactly what my hormonal imbalance was, because that was creating the menstrual cycles being so irregular, I managed to still heal it by balancing my hormones using a natural supplement. And I do have another channel where I talk a lot more about this, and I will link it in my pinned comment section below. But my channel is called Hey Hun, H-U-N, where I'm talking all about this in depth, not around astrology. So when you have Uranus and Neptune aspects in your moon, it just creates a lot of difficulties with your moon feeling more stabilized to have a consistent menstrual cycle. Capricorn moons and Saturn aspects in your moon can delay your chances of having children. My advice is, once you kind of reach 30, start the process of looking into how much egg production you have, you know, putting your eggs into, freezing your eggs. If you don't plan to have kids now, honestly, my advice to you guys who don't plan to have kids, even those of you who have Saturn in your 5th house, please freeze your eggs, okay? Because if you're not planning to have kids now, there can be a period in time where eventually you do want to have kids, but you haven't got the ideal partner, you haven't got the ideal situation, but you're trying to have kids and it's just not happening with ease. Please freeze your eggs. I had a client, right, who had Saturn in her 5th house and she had Capricorn there as well. And I said to her, you know, when it comes to your time to have kids, you may feel like you don't want to have kids, or you may have one now, not have one for like 10 years, because Saturn in there delays things. And it can also feel like you are, you know, having kids becomes a heavy burden, a lot of responsibilities. And I think a year had passed since she had had her reading with me, and she left a comment on my pregnancy video, and she was like, you know, well, I did have a kid actually, honey. And I was like, well, I didn't say you're never gonna have them. That's not what astrology means. And what happened, right, was favorsome planets, right, such as Venus and Jupiter, and they happened to be conjunct in her 5th house at that time where she ended up pregnant. If that conjunction didn't happen, she may not have had her child until a lot later in life because of how her chart is positioned natally. Those natal placements of Saturn, it just creates a delay or a heavy burden or a restriction upon having kids. The 6th house ruler being in the 5th house can also create health issues linked to having children. Looking at inflammation, You know, you got things like fibroids and cysts. I find that to be very common when you have Mars in Cancer, Mars aspects in your moon, Mars in the 5th house, Mars in the 8th house, and also even if Mars is aspect in the Sun, right? Mars creates inflammation, and inflammation is like growths in the body, things like that, which can be found due to poor diet, you know, poor health, and also even in terms of hormones. Like inflammation is linked to everything, but Mars tends to create the inflammation. The Neptune aspect can create the, I'm not sure what the inflammation is, but when you have Mars aspect in the moon, remember inflammation can be run through the whole body, but Mars in Cancer, Mars aspect in the moon creates inflammation that can affect your ability to conceive. Even in terms of particular degrees, right? Think about slow. I'm thinking of Taurus is coming to mind, right? Taurus, although this is Venus energy, Venus is very favoursome, but Taurus, even ruling the 5th house, can create some sort of delay. Taurus degrees are 2, 14 and 26. If your moon sits in those degrees, if your 5th house is ruled by those degrees, that can also indicate that there is a slow process towards having children. Not that it can't happen, but it can be a slow process towards having kids. Like people who have South Node in the 5th house, you'll hear them say things like, yeah, I don't want to have kids. I'm not really interested in having kids. No, I don't really like kids. I hate kids. But they are big kids themselves, you know? They are just in a place where I've been there, done that in my past life. I'm not interested. But also, South Node is our early days in life as well. So there's something about children that they have experienced, their own personal experience with other kids, where they just feel like, yeah, I don't really feel comfortable having kids based on what I've seen from children growing up. So I wouldn't say it's infertility related. It can be, but most of the time these people just don't want to have kids. When Saturn transits the South Node, your South Node, right? Saturn's transiting your South Node, or when you have South Node, when you have South Node transit the 4th, the 5th and the 8th house, those can also indicate, you know, miscarriages or losses. You know, remember I was saying before about the South Node natally being in the 5th house? I've been there, done that before. It kind of is very similar to the transit wise, where maybe you want it, like you want to have your baby, but the universe is like, no, it's not the right time, you're not ready right now. So that transit can kind of create that sort of loss. When you have Uranus in Capricorn, and Uranus is opposite your Cancer Sun, for example, right? Uranus aspecting that sign of Cancer, I don't identify with that sign. I don't identify with the purpose of that sign. So Cancer being, I want to protect, you know, I want to look after, I want to nurture. And the Sun being expression towards children, towards my own kids. It's like, well, no, it's not really for me. You know, I don't really want to do that. So you'll find that those placements can also indicate that they don't really want to have kids. Again, the whole infertility side to things. If Aquarius rules this house, even if Uranus is in this house, right? Uranus brings unexpected pregnancies, but Uranus can also bring this, you know what, I don't really want to have kids. Uranus likes to rebel, you know, in regardless of whatever house he's in. I'm trying to rebel from this energy. I don't want to be a parent. I don't like kids. It can bring that energy, but it can also bring, even if you were to have a child, a lot of responsibilities can come with that child. That child could be very special, right? Your child could be taking medication for a particular reason, because there's something about health here with Uranus that can be linked to things being unconventional parenting. You could be homeschooling them. They could have things like ADHD, because Uranus is also energy, so that can be linked to medication, things like that. But the parenting's unconventional when Uranus sits here. And even if Saturn is here as well, it can show a heavy burden, you know, a heavy burden on having to be a parent. A child who is very challenging or difficult, or very challenging or difficult, or making it harder. Or making it harder for you to enjoy just being someone's mum. When it comes to Chiron, right, a lot of people have Chiron in the 5th house, Chiron in Leo, Chiron in Cancer even. Chiron is, as we know, the wounded healer. He's there and he induces a lot of fears, and he's not always sure of how to heal this energy. But there's a lot of fears that are going to prevent you from being able to have kids. Things tend to happen over your years, in your younger years, where you're very afraid of becoming a parent. And this could just be linked to what things you were exposed to as a child growing up that do prevent that, you know, process of happening. But one thing I've noticed, even about Chiron transits, is if for me, I got pregnant when Chiron was squaring my moon. And although it's a horrible square, I've got it opposing my moon natally, it was very positive because I managed to get pregnant with Chiron. It was a very healing experience to me. Chiron transits, especially if it's a square or position, whatever, although it is not a great transit, it does create the unexpected pregnancies as well. And it's almost like I'm going to heal you in this moment in time. I'm going to heal your moon right now by giving you this baby. But Chiron does essentially create a lot of fears of being a parent, especially if it sits in the 5th house and also in Leo. Pluto aspecting your moon. This is very, very common. Think of your moon as your emotional environment, right? And where you feel safe. And if you've grown up in an environment where financially, you know, your parents didn't have enough money, you felt very unsafe at home, you felt unsafe emotionally, whatever it might be, there's a level of feeling unsafe. You grow up and you feel like, you know what, I don't want to have kids because I'm afraid of losing control, or not having any money, or not being in control of my emotions, or the things that make me feel secure, whatever that might be. And that is enough to prevent your ability to have children. But that moon, or that Pluto aspect in your moon, shows us that once you psychologically evolve through that issue, children can very easily come, you know, and children become a transformation for you in terms of like, you know, you might want to make your child feel emotionally safe. Like I was saying before, if your fear growing up was not feeling emotionally safe, once you have kids, that's going to be your focus, is to make them feel emotionally safe or financially stable, whatever it might be. Kids are going to change you and contribute to your healing. People that have Pluto aspect in their moon don't always come from, and even Pluto in the 4th house, don't always come from the most humbling home in terms of feeling that sense of security. So based on what you experienced as a child, which usually links us to some type of trauma, that can be enough to withhold the idea of even having kids. You know, even if these people do have kids, there can be trauma linked to postnatal depression, even Capricorn moon, Saturn aspect in the moon, postnatal depression, Saturn in the 3rd house and the 12th house, all postnatal depression, even Saturn aspect in Mercury, my gosh. Neptune aspect in your moon, Mercury, 12th house, 3rd house, can also contribute to postnatal depression. But the thing is with Pluto, the purpose is to have kids to go through a healing period, but Pluto induces trauma at the same time. And I've read for people who have Pluto aspect in their sun, or even in the 4th house, and they'll say things like, you know, I hate the world because the world is just not a great place to be. I'd hate to bring kids into the world. You know, how I was raised has contributed to why I don't want to have kids. You know, there's just a trauma linked to the delay of having kids or not having kids at all. I've also found the sun, when the sun is aspecting the moon, I found that to be quite common as well, you know, when it comes to infertility. The moon is obviously very emotional, very deep, very expressive, and the sun does a lot of deflecting from, you know, the emotions, and it essentially really makes the moon feel like it's not being seen or heard or understood. So when it comes to fertilities, there's just more of a focus, especially if it's an opposition, you know. I'm going to be more focused upon my outer self, my sense of achievement, you know, my career, my goals, then the focus being my home, my family, my fertility even. When it comes to the gay community, right, and being lesbian, whatever, right, there can be charts that indicate that you may not have your own biological child, But we can see, like, one thing I've noticed this so much: Aquarius moons, Gemini moons, 11th house, 3rd house moons are notorious for dating someone who already has kids, or dating someone who carries your child or carries a child, but there was some sort of IVF, artificial insemination, or a friend carries your child in order for you to have kids, right? Because Gemini and Aquarius represent communities. So you are always looked at as a community mum, a community dad, you know, by everybody else. So there's something about there being an unconventional way of having kids, even if Uranus is involved as well. There can be an unconventional way of having kids, but also there is there's a friend that tends to be involved in your need to essentially conceive. So Uranus shows us, you know, IVF and unconventional ways of, you know, having kids. And I have Uranus conjunct my moon. Now I remember before I managed to get pregnant, I did look into seeing a fertility doctor to find out what's going on. I took lots of medication, and we was about to process, you know, go into the process of artificial insemination. But I ended up falling pregnant, you know, naturally. So, and a lot of that was down to using supplements. Now my advice to you guys is to watch my pregnancy video, but also based on your sun sign and your rising sign, what rules your 5th house? So if I'm an Aries sun, right, my 5th house, if my sun sat on the ascendant, my 5th house would be ruled by Leo. Now Leo full moons, or let's say new moons, great time to manifest pregnancies. That's when I got. Now I recommend you guys watch my pregnancy video, which I will link up here, but also it will be in the comments pinned below. If you're looking to find out when the best time is, if you're trying for the best time to get pregnant, look at the placement of your sun. Like, look at your sun and your rising. We want to activate that 5th house energy, right? So for example, I'm an Aries, so put Aries as your chart ruler, Aries as your ascendant. That will then activate Leo, the 5th house for me. Now for me, for someone who was trying for a long ass time, I got pregnant during a new moon in Leo. New moon periods are great for manifestation, and I remember my friend who's also an Aries sun, we both manifested getting pregnant, right? We were speaking about, oh, you know, I want to have a baby, it's time to get pregnant now, we're 31, let's get. It was really funny, and we both found out that we were both pregnant on the same day. And during that time, that day, Venus was transiting through our 5th house when we found out that we were pregnant. But we essentially conceived during Leo, during a Leo new moon. Even in terms of your ascendant, right? So my ascendant is in Gemini, right? Gemini would then activate Libra as my chart ruler. So remember I was saying I found out when Venus went into my 5th house, when Venus was in Libra was when I found out. With Libra being in my 5th house, you want to look for an eclipse, right? Which can be a full moon. I prefer really a new moon, but full moon as well. Just basically an eclipse in your 5th house will be a strong indication for trying to conceive during that time. But so much more plays into this, and that's why I made the video talking a lot more about pregnancy and how to find pregnancy in astrology. Make sure you guys are going to go check that video out if you're interested in finding out when the best time is to conceive. So people, that is my video talking a little bit about infertility. But I hope that's a lot of information for you guys. Yes, I do have consultations on my website available, but I'm really trying to get my documents out there because it's written already to go out, downloadable. If you guys are interested, please click the link below to have a read of my documents. And yeah, that's it for now, people. I will see you guys next time. Bye.